I want to discuss a couple other things that have popped up in the world of wrestling. This one seems to be the thing that makes me intrigued. Chris Jericho's contract status with AEW. He's obviously been with AEW since 2019, since the company launched. People have their own personal opinions on Chris Jericho and whether or not they like Chris Jericho, that's fine. I'm not saying I'm a big fan of the learning tree stuff right now, but I will not disrespect Chris Jericho and what he's done for AEW, because he has done a lot of great things for AEW since leaving the WWE and going to AEW, helping them launch as a promotion, helping them become he was the inaugural world champion. Well, now we have a detail on his contract status. Ibu from Wrestle Purist has reported that Chris Jericho's current deal within AEW is up in 2025. And no injury time or anything has actually been added. They're not adding any time to Chris Jericho's contract. And it doesn't look like anything has been guaranteed for Chris Jericho to stay in the company or to leave the company. Nobody really knows what is happening here. So I want to talk about this with you guys. And I want to talk about it now. Here's the thing, guys. Chris Jericho, bound for WWE Hall of Fame. No matter what anybody says, I see Chris Jericho going to WWE. I see him being part of the Hall of Fame. I would go as far as saying, I know Chris Jericho speaks very highly of AEW. He understands the importance of AEW. But I have always believed that Chris Jericho wanted to be there from the start. And I don't think he necessarily cares to be there till the end. I don't know Chris Jericho personally. I'm just coming up with this and speculating based on my own personal thoughts and my own observations. I can very well see Chris Jericho leaving AEW in 2025. First of all, it would actually make a lot of sense for Chris Jericho to leave AEW. AEW has grown significantly to the point where Chris Jericho is no longer needed. I think we can all agree on that. I think we can all agree that Chris Jericho leaving AEW makes sense. Like, AEW needed Chris Jericho in the beginning. It was very important when you're shopping TV deals in the beginning. Hey, we have Chris Jericho, a future WWE Hall of Famer, a former champion. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I can understand, I could see with Chris Jericho leaving the company. They needed him in the beginning. They don't necessarily need him now. Now, as far as Chris Jericho wrestling for the WWE, I don't necessarily see that being the case either. I don't. Truly, I do not see that being the case. And also, this is nothing against Chris Jericho, but I think Chris Jericho has been oversaturated in AEW. Constantly in a faction, constantly in a storyline, constantly taking up TV time. Then you got the learning tree. You had the stuff with Hook. Constant. I think AEW's audience has actually grown sick of Chris Jericho. So Chris Jericho going to WWE is actually not that far-fetched. The reality is, I don't think Chris Jericho would go to WWE and be booked as a full-time performer. I do not see Triple H prioritizing Chris Jericho over Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, or whatever it may be. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Chris Jericho could re-sign with AEW, stay with AEW, be a producer, be an agent, be an ambassador for AEW. Very much like Sting is, right? Sting just signed a Legends deal. Chris Jericho could very well do the same thing with AEW. He could work part-time and then have like a full-time position backstage, right? But the truth is, Chris Jericho could also go to WWE and do the same thing. And if Chris Jericho is interested, I can see WWE even offering Chris Jericho a little bit of a spot in the development of those in NXT. I don't think it is as far-fetched as people think. If AEW needed Chris Jericho to survive, I think Chris Jericho would choose AEW. I have come to the belief, I've come to the understanding that AEW does not necessarily need Chris Jericho. So in my humble opinion, in 2025, when Chris Jericho's contract expires, if there's no added time, I'm just saying, don't be shocked to find out that maybe he goes to WWE. Don't be shocked. And if Chris Jericho returns to WWE, I don't expect him to be full-time, so you shouldn't either. And let's just say what it is. A lot of people in AEW, I've said it earlier in this video, a lot of people in AEW have outgrown Chris Jericho. The fan base, in a weird way, is kind of turned on Chris Jericho. Because that's what AEW's fan base does. They turn on a lot of people. They do. That's fine. Turn on Chris Jericho all you want. But just remember, when this company was trying to get off the ground, they absolutely needed him. And thankfully, AEW, as we have all seen, there's not one individual performer that helps AEW's ratings or attendance. And that is proof that they don't necessarily need him. So if Chris Jericho goes to WWE, I have no issue with it. If Chris Jericho stays in AEW, I have no issue with it. I think sometimes people look at Chris Jericho's political beliefs and they use that as a way to turn on him as well. You guys know how I feel about that. I'm judging a TV show. I'm judging professional wrestlers. I'm not judging them on their political beliefs. They have the freedom to believe what they want to believe. That's their right. They have that ability. But I'm not going to turn on Chris Jericho. Even though I don't mess with the learning tree gimmick, I'm not going to turn on Chris Jericho. It was absolutely incredibly important to the development of AEW. Should he leave AEW, there will be a lot of people in WWE that can learn from Chris Jericho. A great performer. He understood the business. He's a veteran. And no matter what, I do believe he gets inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And maybe it all happens in Las Vegas.